Okay, we're here live, and I'm actually in close to Jacksonville, outside Jacksonville, and we are going to give the class tonight online. This is the first actual online class for the Noahide group, and you guys are going to find it. I'm sure you'll show up at some point, but you'll see it on recording if not. And of course, the Jewahides are also invited too. It's going to be a very general class going through some of the deeper ideas about the traits that we acquire. And I'm going to also explain tonight, since this is, I don't see you guys yet, and I look forward to seeing you soon. I think I'm talking to myself right now. But I am going to explain a little bit what the Noahide concept is. What are we talking about exactly? And let's start, because there's an idea that there are Jews and there's another religion which is called B'nai Noach. Now, it's not really another religion, and there's a question about creating other religions. But a person in the world today defines themselves as what's called a Ben Noach, a son of Noah. So we got to understand something about Noah. Now, this is a big issue, especially, I didn't see the movie Noah, but I understand that it was as bad as I thought it would be. Russell Crowe is a great actor, but the message I got, which I wasn't going to go see the movie, because I knew it was going to get butchered, but the message I got that was Noah was a cruel guy, he was an angry guy, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Noah was an ish tzaddik, was a righteous man. Now, I want to talk a bit about what it means to be righteous. And this is in contradistinction to something that's called a chassid, someone who is going a little bit, a lot, maybe deeper or different approach in how they develop themselves in terms of their traits and thereby their spiritual growth. Let's understand. Let's say a person has a trait where they are full of desire that's unbridled. Now, what medicine would you use to deal with that? Well, the first thing you would do is you would go and you would say, I need to control that. So if it's unbridled desire, I need control to not have desire. That's a conflict and a battle in terms of the traits of a human being. And that's not bad. That's actually good. That's the first level. That's called being a tzaddik, being a righteous person. I'm not going beyond what I have to go beyond, but I'm being righteous. I'm doing what is right. Now, there's a deeper level of understanding of this, which is a harder and a different service. And that's as follows. If I go and say, let's say I have unbridled desire. Now, it's true. The first step of having unbridled desire is going to be to control it, to have the counterbalance. But the deeper understanding of the trait is to then bring it back to its root in holiness. Means bring it back to where that trait is positive. And that's completely opposite in the battle. Let me explain. So if I go and I say, hey, Mark, good to see you. If I go and I say that, okay, you have unbridled desire. Yes, first step, the battle, I control it. The deeper step, which is beyond being a tzaddik, being a righteous person, is to go and say, what is the root of that desire, and where can I use that in a way that's going to be holy, proper, and good? And that's really called the fixing of the midot, the fixing of the traits, as opposed to just the controlling of the traits. In the Kabbalistic writing, one is called iskafia, forcing, holding it down, and one is called flipping it around. Flipping it around means that you're actually bringing it to its root. So now if I'm a person, I'm full of desire, if my desire now goes to something that's positive and holy and connected and really is actually the flip side of all of the negative desires. When I have desire, that's not in itself a bad thing. I have desire. Now, when I take the desire, I first need to control it. So it's balanced. But the deeper level, if I'm a person of desire, then I have to find the root of the desire. And that's what it means. The mystics say that the trait of desire, that will never be destroyed, as opposed to the trait of anger and haughtiness, which will be removed in the world, the mystics say. But the idea of desire is not removed, it's transformed. It's turned into desire for spirituality. That's what it's called. And those that understand can understand this is a very, very deep idea. Okay? This is really the idea of a person becoming one, which, by the way, is the idea of intimacy of a husband and wife. This idea of becoming one. Now, let's go for a second to talk about traits. Because as you're going to learn all these things, the Hebrew terminology is completely different than the translation that you're seeing the world through. And that's just the way it is. Because we say, the mystics say that Hebrew is like white light. I don't mean, well, modern Hebrew is based in biblical Hebrew, in Torah Hebrew, in Lashon HaKodesh, the language of holiness. But it's a little different. But the Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, is like white light. And what happens is that when it goes through a prism, it turns into the spectrums of the rainbow. Okay, which really is the idea of the seven, which is the 70, the nations of the world, which will go on and get to all that. But the point when you understand right now is that when I say a word and it gets translated into your language, so you take it as that's what it means, because all the concept of that language and that flavor of the color is how your world is painted. So I'm going to take the idea of traits and give you the real meaning of traits. The word for trait is called midot. Midot. That's the translation back into the holy language of Lashon Kodesh of traits called midot. Now, of course, as you will learn, as if you've learned with me before, you know it's not what it means. The word midot does not really translate as traits. It translates as the word measurements. Measurements. Why? Because the idea of traits is that the trait itself is not necessarily good or bad. It depends on the measure that you set it up in. Okay? So, for example, is it bad to be a person who is passionate? No. As we said before, passion in the right way, in the right measure, is the greatest thing in the world. To be totally not passionate is the worst thing in the world. And that's going to be true for every single midah. The traits are the balancing point. And you want to be a master of the traits. Maimonides, the great scholar, philosopher, the way he sets it up is to look for what he calls the Shvil HaZahav, the golden middle path. Okay, and he even has what would be today called the behavioral system of counseling therapy that he recommends. Obviously, he's going to a very deep level. He talks about being a doctor of the soul. But on a simple level, what it means here is that Maimonides says, Rambam says, well, if you are a person who's very, very stingy, then your midah, your measurement, is skewed to one side. So what you got to do now is you need to go on a strict diet, a crazy opposite binge right now to control yourself. So if you are the stingy guy, you have to become the tremendous giver. You got to give charity. You got to go and you got to, I'm not saying throw your money away at bad things, but obviously you have to become a person that is not afraid of letting go, because you start doing the opposite. And then according to Maimonides, what happens is after you do that for a while and you get used to it, you will now come back to the middle path, because your tendency is more leaning towards the other measurement, what I called midot, which we translate in English as traits, but it really means measurements. Okay? So now, this is the idea of what we're going to go into in this series now. This series is going to be, I'm going to go through a lot of the different traits that a human being has and has to understand how to put them in the right measure. And then the deeper understanding, after you put them in the right measure, the next concept will be, how do you go and metaken the midas? How do you fix it in its root? Where you're not just, balancing, but you have actually gone to the root of this trait and you have purified it. Now, since this essentially is a class of Bnei Noach, as I said, Evan and Bnei Israel are invited too. But the idea I want to understand is Noah, because Noah was called an East Tzaddik, a man of righteousness, and therefore his greatness was not so much in going up to the root of the trait. His greatness was that he did what was right. And he was a very holy person, did what was right. But that becomes now the path of the Bnei Noach. That becomes the path of the children of Noach. It's a life that goes and lives correctly. Okay? It's a life that walks a path where you don't go and now do something that's out of bounds. You balance it. You do what's right. That's called the 7 Noahide laws, which are the 7 laws of morality that allow a person to be able to be a righteous moral person. That's really the idea. And that's the main work of Noah. And it's even, if you look at the text, it's just fascinating in terms of the idea of the rainbow. And the rainbow, what it really is that, just to digress for a moment, the generation of the flood, what happened was, their main flaw was desire. It says that they were having relations. Oh, we have all these scandals going on right now. Ooh, this is fun. I'm going to get to all that stuff. Don't worry, it's good stuff. But we had right now, that generation was doing not exactly what this generation does. This generation has its own flavor. But it was a generation that was seeped in illicit relations. And it was out of control. And they crossed the line. They had a world that was full of pleasure. You don't have to be a genius to figure out the connection between our society today. But back in the time of the flood, there was a world that the sages discussed as the weather is always temperate. People lived long lives. It was a very, very beautiful and abundant period in the world. And that just led them to go and to get more into their desires until it was unbridled, kind of like today, out of control all over the place. And that's why the punishment essentially was a flood. What does a flood mean? As I've been saying the whole week, this seems to be the theme of the week. The flood is water. And water, as we said, is desire. In the positive, it's giving. It's kindness. But when it's misused right now, that water that makes everything grow also makes all the pleasures in the world come out. And that becomes unbridled desire. And that's why the waters that came down for them, which could have been waters of blessing if the desire trait was in proper measure, it turned into waters that were completely out of measure, and it was a flood. And that's really the sign of Noah. Noah, then the sign is the rainbow. The rainbow is where Hashem says, where God says, I will not destroy the world again. And if you understand how a rainbow works, we understand that it's the light that's sort of going through the wet air, so to speak. The water, the desires, and the fire that's tempering it and not allowing it to go out of control. That produces the rainbow. You see then a rainbow. It's actually the combination and the balance where, although there's water in the air, it is the sunlight that comes through it tempers it. And that is therefore the deeper meaning of the guarantee of the rainbow, that the world won't be destroyed with water again. Okay? There will not be a flood again. because that was when desire was completely out of whack, then the response was the water that was also out of whack and created this flood. And that's also why when you look at it, just to take the analogy a little further, when you look at a bow and arrow, we call that a kesha. We call the rainbow a bow. And the bow really, the arrow is what's going to shoot and get to the target. The bow is what creates the tension and the holding back. And that's really the balance and where the people of the flood went off their rockers, basically. They jumped ship. They went wild. That's what happened. So what we're going to do in this session is we're going to start understanding the traits, the midot, the measurements, how you control them, what's a good trait, what's not a good trait, and thereby we'll understand the deeper level we'll talk about, which is going to be the level of how you mitaken, how you go into the root of what it is. Okay, now let's. I don't know how we don't have a system yet for questions, so I'll I guess next time we do it in person, we'll have questions. Who's there? Okay, all right, so fine. All right, let's go on a second. Now, how do we start with understanding the midos, the traits? So, question is if I should really get into the situation in the world today, because I don't want to have a political discussion. See, right now, what happens in the world is that politics are so toxic that if you look at an idea, if you look at something, you are going to be attacked one way or another. And it's hard to step out of the system. So I don't know if I should do this, but I would actually kind of wouldn't mind talking about the President of the United States. But it would be from a whole different, if we did this, guys, from a whole different perspective. So I'm going to let it rip here with your permission. And then I guess Mark will edit whatever we have to edit afterwards. But I'm going to let it rip a little bit. Let's talk and think about what's going on in this. So we have a principle in the Talmud. It says that the name of the person kind of shows the essence of the person. So I like to say something about President Trump. His name is called Trump, which is the ability to trump someone. And that's what he does. That's what he does. He goes and he says the thing in a very strong way because that's his MO. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, depends who you ask, of course. It's a bipartisan question. But I don't think that's really where this trait is at. Let's try to understand. Let's talk about the trait of a person who's haughty. Let's talk about that a second and talk about the opposite, which is humility. So, how does a person become humble? What does that mean? How is a person humble? What do you do to become humble? So, humility is really kind of not what you think it is, and I'll prove it to you, because the Torah says, the Bible says, that the most humble person in all of history was Moses. Okay, now, Moshe, he was the only person that can go to talk to God whenever he wanted. That's what he was. Not only that, but I don't know if you realize this, but everyone knows the famous Michelangelo, expression of what Moshe was. He gives him horns, which is where the canard that Jews have horns comes from. But Michelangelo was in a mistranslation. The word that says in the text, it says karne or, which is sometimes translated as horns, but it actually means beams of light. And it says when Moshe came down from Mount Sinai, there was beams of light that were coming out of his face. And because of that, he had to wear a mask. And he wore a mask his whole life. It was the first masked man, the first superhero. He wore a mask. The only time he took the mask off is when he taught the Torah to the people. He got the Torah from God, and then he transmitted it to the people, and the Talmud records the process, how he did it. He first taught it to Aaron's sons, and the 70 elders, and the people, and they started learning together. But what happened was that that's the only time he took his mask off, because the light was coming out of his face was so powerful. So now, it makes a question. If you know you're the only person ever talking to God whenever you want, and you wear a mask because there's beams of light coming out of your face, do you think that you would say, I'm a nothing, I'm a nobody? It's kind of weird. Right? How does that work? How does a person be the most humble human being when they know they're the greatest person in the world? It's a hard question. So there's two different approaches I want to discuss. I'm going to take one tonight and we'll do one at a different time. So one approach is that the way that you're humble is when you realize that everything that you have is what was given to you by God, because nobody made themselves. You didn't create yourself. Now, I understand you went to college, you did this, you did that, I understand, great. But who gave you the ability, who gave you the mind? You didn't create anything, really. And so what happens is that a person can develop humility like Moshe, even when he is the greatest person in the world, by understanding the more he accomplishes, the more he does, understanding more and more how that was all a gift for him. Because we don't realize that. We think every time we do something, it was me that did it. It was my power. It was my power. So Moshe is so humble because even though he is the greatest human being, he understands that the source of what he is only God. Now that is a conundrum in our world, because in our world what happens is when I do something good, I want to say it was me. It was me. I did it. I'm the smartest guy. I'm the brilliant guy. That's what I want to say. So that is the root of haughtiness. Haughtiness goes back to the Garden of Eden when the snake says to Chava, whether it was a statement or whether it was animals making their sounds, different discussion, but the concept that was conveyed to Chava, to what she stood, Adam even understood, was that if I go and I eat the fruit, I will be like God. That's what it says. So the process of what happens here is that a humble person is God-centered. He understands that everything he is from God. Now that's good, because it doesn't mean you disappear and you're a nothing. It means you're connected to your source. The other person is living a fantasy land, because that's a haughty person. That's a person who goes and what he starts saying, it's me, it's my power, I did it. So now what he's done is he has removed the source of his entire existence, which is what it says in the Talmud, that a haughty person, he pushes away God. God's like, I can't live in the same world as him because he creates his own world. He cuts off from the source of existence. Okay? So this is like really two different traits, and it's funny because they are seemingly be superfluous or just like just two traits, but it's actually much deeper than that. What happens is the trait of humility is going to be the trait to be able to receive everything. Okay? The more that you understand that you are connected to the source, the more you're able to receive, and the greater you are. The more, to the degree that you cut yourself off from the source and you become your own thing, then you're only as great as you are, which is not very much, because you can't make anything yourself. Okay? So now, when I think about what's going on in the world right now, so people really have a problem with President Trump's way of saying something. His way of saying something is, I'm trumping you. I'm trumping you. They had a problem. The question is, can you separate the message from the messenger? You don't like the way someone's saying something. Can you hear if there's truth to the point or not? And what's happening today in the world is that there's so much contention that nobody could actually think about concepts and talk about concepts. And it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. I'm gonna leave getting to Trump more in the future, but the fact that he says a lot of things that are right on, a person needs to think about and say, okay, is that true? Is what he's saying, is that, okay, I don't like the way he's saying it because he's in attack mode, he's trumping. And that, do I think that has to do with a problem in terms of personality traits? For sure it does. That's what it does. That's what it is. Do I think that that's the flavor of our society right now? It is. Our society is very much polarized, and if you think that, you know, you're right and I'm wrong, or you don't accept my thing, then that's a very negative place that we go into. Now, coming back to what I want to talk about to explain the introduction to traits, therefore. The idea that you will be humble and you realize that you have a source, that is a crucial first step to dealing with traits. And let me explain to you why. Because the essence of who you are is called the shoresh neshama, the root of your soul. And that's actually who you are. Now, why are you that way? That's the way you are because that's the way you are. It's not actually something that you create. The deep, yes, you can become a great person or a very bad person. I true that. But for example, if I say to you, you know, what do you really like? So you say, well, I really like, I don't know, I like when people honor me. So I say to you, well, why do you like that? And you say, well, I don't know, I just like it. So we can get into a whole psychology of it. Maybe it's disturbed, this and that. But there's a place in you, there's something that you want that comes from someplace. And that's called, when you think about the deepest part of a person, what they really want, that's a place where you start to touch the root of who they are. It's called the shoresh neshama, the root of the soul. Let me explain this more. So if we understand that as opposed to our haughty person who's now, he has his whole own world, if we understand that we don't have anything of our own, we're giving this, our creation, from God, we understand we have that. So every human being is going to be a different flavor and have a different piece in the puzzle. Okay, everyone's going to have a different thing that they like. The Talmud says, you know, God didn't make it. You know, what happens if everyone loved to be a perfumer and no one wanted to be a tanner? There'd be no tanners in the world. What happens if everyone, you know, were basketball players? You know, doctors in the world. Everyone has different qualities. The deeper meaning of that is that the world is created in such a way that everyone has their way to experience godliness. Okay, that's called the root of who you are. Okay, now let's try to understand this because it's a very difficult concept. But let's try to grab it a second. If I say, "What do you like?" and you say, "I like honor," so what should I say to you? I could tell you you shouldn't like it. It's a bad thing. You need to control it. If you don't do it, then if you don't control it, it's gonna overcome your life. I could tell you that. The problem is that if you've really touched what you really want, the deepest part of what a person really wants, it is because it is. It's what you want. So the answer there is not going to be to say don't want honor. The answer is going to be to look at what the root of the desire for honor is. And how to translate it from it being a thing that's not real, like the guy who says, I'm my own God, and he has his fake world, how to go and to make it that something now, the honor that you want, is a positive, real thing. Let me explain what this means. The difference between something that is true and not is if it's eternal, if it's everlasting. Because when you say, oh, I love to be honored, well, okay, well, that's very good. That's very temporal. That's not going to last. That's not going anyplace. I love food. Okay, so that also has an end. You can't eat anymore. The things that you love deep down, that are the root of what you're about, there's two ways that is going to manifest itself. One way is in the sense of the negative expression of it. I want honor. Or maybe a deeper expression now, with the root of person's honor, maybe he wants people to have an appreciation of him, understand his greatness, or express his greatness, or now have him go and really appreciate what he's about to express it. So really now we're starting to change it into another concept altogether, which is how the quality of in the negative of wanting honor in its root really may actually have a place of holiness that's going to stay. Right? If you develop yourself and you become something, even after you're dead, that's what you built. That's eternal. So that's the shift. So the person first has to understand that what it makes me tick. What am I about? And that's why the worst first trait is the gaiva, is the haughtiness, because then you cut yourself off from the source. The more you're able to now connect to your source and realize that you are a flavor, you are a spark, you have a certain soul, that's the root of your soul, that's what you are, as a reflection of an eternal idea of godliness. Once you understand that, then you have what to work with. Now, when you take the shorish neshama, the root of who you are, and you put on top of it the traits that are the challenges and the balances that help you to get there. Okay? So if I'm a person, let's say, I'm a person who has this yearning to be recognized. Okay? So now I have different skills and different measurements that I am able to enact in order to get what I want. But there's two different parts to this. One is that you have to make sure that you're using the traits properly, but even more fundamental, you have to make sure that what it is that you want is actually real and everlasting. Because if it's not, then you're going to use your traits in a way that are going to get you what you want, which you're going to be stuck. So, okay, you're a person that wants desire. Now you have these traits. You're a driven person. Okay, so now you're driving yourself to get something that's a dead end. It's not very good. So, yeah, we got to do two things here. First of all, we have to think about, to the best degree we can, it's very difficult, but think about what speaks to us. What is the thing that touches me that I want more than anything? Called my rutzah, my will. What do I want? You know, it's called in the Talmud, it's called the oneg, the pleasure. What gives me the pleasure of experiencing eternity? What gives me the pleasure? Now again, there's two parts to it. There's the pleasure, the thing that makes you tick in the positive, but most likely, unless we've worked on ourselves for a very long time, we are in the same thing that makes us tick, but in the negative. That's just the way it is, because we have to develop that. We have to work on that. Okay? And that's the first question to ask yourself. Is the thing that you want, is that thing everlasting? You know? You want to be a rock and roll star. All right. Well, that's not everlasting. Oh, but now if you want to go and you want to take the quality of being able to be the rock and roll star for something that's everlasting, then you've now hit the root of who you are, but from the true place, the everlasting place. And now if you go and you want to go and to share with people truth in a way that's eternal, then you've hooked into what you are, and you've aligned where you're going. Once you've aligned where you're going, then we got to deal with the midot, the measurements by which we now weigh out how to get where we need to go, and how to go and to use those traits. What's the good trait? What's the bad trait? Today was an introduction, and I will get to it more, but I did throw out for you, as you heard, the idea about haughtiness and about humility. And the reason why I'm starting with that trait, which we're going to get into more next time to understand, is exactly what I told you before. Because that trait is not just a side trait. That's a trait of where you connect to your source and where you disconnect. And so, therefore, that's going to be the first trait we're going to talk about, how a person is able to really connect, and what happens in the opposite. And God willing, we're going to see a little bit about some of the things that are the traits that have completely gotten out of hand today, and are unfortunately the daily dredge that you have to hear with news and politicizing of things that are coming from a negative trait expression, and in its root also from a place where people are not tuned in to what really things are about.